Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, I am bringing you my guest,
Heshan.
He is the creator behind The Model Man. Now, let me ask you, how is your relationship with your family? Do you regularly have deep and meaningful conversations with your parents? Could you imagine working with your dad day in and day out? That is why Heshan is here today to share his story and his service. He turned his family relationship around from having resentment with each other to now with acceptance. And yes, he is working with his dad, and they are both continuing to learn more about each other, to learn more stories and layers so they can continue to have a great relationship. I personally have a very close relationship with my family, and it really breaks my heart when other people tell me how much pain they're going through when they talk about their families. Thankfully for Hish and his dad, for having such an amazing service, especially for men out there to open up the emotional side of them.
Heshan
and I talked more about family relationships on this episode. We talked about mental health, we talked about the self journey, we talked about how important it is to take on self responsibility.
Heshan
And I honestly could have gone on and on. That's why this interview is going to be in two parts. Now, we would really love it if you can screenshot this episode, however you're watching it, and tag us on social. Share the love. I'm so excited for you to listen to his story. So enjoy the interview.
Right, so you were an angry person.
Definitely. I had massive anger issues growing up. I bottled it up for a long time, and I was very unemotional. People wouldn't see it. I just bottled it. A lot of it was directed at both my mum and my dad. My dad for the way he treated mum growing up and the way he spoke to her sometimes, things like that. And then for my mum for not standing up for herself, which is actually a very common thing for children to go through, is to blame the person who's in the victim phase of being a victim, and then blaming the person who's treating the victim poorly for being like a criminal in their mind. And so I held that for a long time. And then I actually got into a relationship in my early 20s where a lot of that I felt safe to express that, and it didn't come out in the healthiest ways. And I've come to peace with that now. And it's actually a really powerful thing to be able to talk about these things as men, like to admit that we were angry and that we projected that onto people and take responsibility for it. The whole thing with the model man is about taking responsibility for our actions, because it's taking full responsibility for the impression that our character leaves on others is that superpower that I talked about before. It is that freedom. It is that access to change. And then it puts men in a position to actually be the people who are conduits for change, rather than perpetuating the problem that's been there for generations.
I love it. Is there anyone in your life that you haven't forgiven?
I think I'm still on that journey with my dad. I think there's people that I definitely haven't forgiven in full capacity, for sure. And one thing with forgiveness is learning that it's a process and it's a healing. And healing a wound, it just doesn't happen instantly. Healing a wound, like if you get a cut on your arm, it takes some time for the cells to get around the arm, like the wound, and heal and close. So be gentle on yourself when you are trying to forgive and learning to forgive. Just commit to it, and then keep taking the steps forward to deal with what's present for you in forgiving someone. Because there'll be a whole array of things that come up. With me and my dad, for example, it was 20 years of me not forgiving him, right? So it was 20 years of seeing scenarios and circumstances, building stories in my mind around him that I had to come to terms with and heal in my mind, so then me and him could get closer. And that journey is still happening today. And I think forgiveness can be instant, but the healing of forgiveness is an ever-going process. Like you can choose to forgive someone and be like, I commit to forgiving you and I forgive you, and tell them that, so they have that freedom. But the actual forgiveness and feeling that in your body is a whole nother thing, where you actually feel clear about the person and you're left with nothing but love for them. That's a very difficult place to get to. And I think it's a distinction that people don't realize, is a lot of people say that they forgive someone and then move on, but they actually haven't come to a place where they could love that person even more than they loved them before. I think that should be the aim of forgiveness.
Yes, you know what? I always tell people it's not about moving on, it's about moving forward. So whatever the lesson is teaching you, you bring on whatever that feeling, sure it may be pain or whatever it is, but you bring it with you and then you deal with it and learn from it. And then yeah,
Yes.
one day you will be like, "Oh, I'm liberated." You will feel so free yourself, and like you said, you're freeing the other person. It is, but it is such a hard thing for many people to do, though. So, how would
Mm.
you encourage people, I guess, to forgive others and forgive themselves?
The encouragement piece would be to see that forgiveness is actually more about yourself than it is the other person. Because not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and then expecting somebody else to die, right? I'm sure you've heard that saying or some similar saying like that. But I think the encouragement is to understand that you actually forgiving is an act of doing something for you. Because a lot of the time when we don't want to forgive someone, we don't want to do it because we don't want them to feel better. Because we're angry at them, so we don't want them to feel good about themselves, and then us to continue to feel bad. But it's just reframing our minds to understand that forgiveness is about us first and dealing with us first so that we can then forgive the other person. I think that's a big part of the process. We can't just forgive ourselves and then still be angry at the other person and like accept that as that's just the way it's going to be. I think it should be the journey of every human being to get to a place where we actually find love for that person again. But understand that that is a journey. And that's a journey within yourself of understanding what love truly is. I think love has so much to it. It's probably the most complicated thing there is on earth to understand. Like what love actually is and how to love unconditionally is probably one of the hardest things that we can ever like attempt to achieve as human beings.
Totally.
But understand as well that we're all collectively trying to move towards that same goal.
Yeah.
So it is our duty to help other people to be able to do that as well. But sometimes we also need to know to let go of situations that aren't serving us in the moment and play the long game. Play the long game. Don't be so hard on yourself that like things aren't working out right now. Just keep working on you. Keep redefining what love is for you, working on it, becoming more of a loving person in your state of being as a state. And then eventually everything around you will fold out to come to love as well. It does start with us before we can give it out to others. So that's my encouragement in terms of forgiveness. Forgive yourself first. Learn how to forgive within you for whatever you haven't forgive yourself for. So then you can give that forgiveness to others.
Yes. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. And I also want to say thank you how before you were being so honest, how you are still trying to work with the forgiveness towards your dad because it is a ongoing process. You are learning something new every day and you are living every day and you're evolving constantly. So of course it's a work in progress. And it all starts, like you said, with yourself. And I really would also encourage people to start to love themselves more and give themselves more respect. And that's kind of hard, I feel. But I love how you said that we need to take on more responsibility, though. What kind of things can people start taking responsible for?
For their thoughts, for their actions, and for their behavior. Um, all the elements that make up our character, right? So I think it's taking responsibility for our character and the impression that our character leaves on others. That's the whole model man concept. If men are able to take that kind of responsibility for themselves and be like, hey, my character actually leaves an impression on anyone that I come into interaction with, then men are going to focus on improving their character because
Mm,
you're not going to want to negatively impact people because you haven't worked on those parts of yourself that can be destructive.
mm,
We all have destructive parts to our character and we all have constructive parts, and it's about not blaming ourselves or being harsh on ourselves that we have flawed characters because nobody is perfect. I think that's the
yeah.
first part to get. The second piece is to then just go make it your life's journey to continuously improve. That's all we can do, and we can't blame people for the past if they're working on improving, right?
Okay.
Because everyone makes mistakes, And then the mark of a man's character or a human being's character is in the actions or the decisions that they make after falling down. So you've fallen down. When I got bottled, when I got hit, I was down. But what was the decision I made to change my life after that so that those kind of things don't happen again? Like my character was marked in the decisions I made going forward, not in what I left behind. But so often human beings have a view of a person that they knew for like 20 years and they hold that view of that person. Right? And you've completely changed, right? I'm sure you resonate with this. I'm sure there's people who you know have a certain view of you because you were friends from when you were like 10, 15 years old and they knew you as Ting at that age. But you're Ting at this age now and you've matured and you've become so much more responsible for your life. You've learned so much more, but they still identify with you as that. So it's important to make sure that people see the new you as much as possible and that you don't allow them to hold you to what you were. If you are making attempts to improve, they can hold you to who you were being if that's who you're still being today, because then that gives you the capacity to learn from somebody else about how to improve.
I feel like everyone, literally everyone, should allow other people to grow and evolve and just be themselves, because you said it so perfectly how the me 10 years ago is definitely different than now. So for whoever that is holding the view of you 10 years ago, then I feel like maybe that's their responsibility to let go of the view. But also it's your responsibility to voice out your values and what you stand for. So
if we're 100% responsible for everything that's happening in our lives, the power is with us. So even if that person isn't taking responsibility, we do what we can on our end to make sure that we maintain our character. That's what it comes down to. Don't give up our character because somebody else isn't doing something. That's a trap that a lot of people fall into is, oh, they're not doing it, so like, why should I? Like, they're being stubborn, like, why do I have to be the bigger person? But it's not about being the bigger person. It's understanding that who you are is who you are and who do you want to be is where your focus should be, not on I'm going to behave based on how other people are behaving.
Yes.
Maintaining who we are, regardless of our environment, and regardless of how other people are treating us, is the goal.
Yes.
Like maintaining that level of composure gives us a power that we just couldn't even possibly begin to fathom, I believe.
Did you say a lot of us haven't achieved?
Haven't been able to achieve that because it's a very difficult thing to get to that point where we take responsibility for everything ourselves, because it means that we have to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely a person who struggles to admit when I'm wrong. And I'm working on it.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for working on yourself so you can continue to help other people. I think having such awareness is so amazing because you are literally living life differently. Instead of playing the survival mode, you are living in a liberating life where you are serving others and serving yourself. So I think that's beautiful. So for those who are listening and watching, if you know it yourself that you need help, especially males, there's the model man right here. Please get in contact. All the details will be in the description. I feel like there is a lot more that I can ask, and I'm trying to think of ways not to cut it short because there is just so much to you that I feel like I can ask, and I just want people to just get in contact with you, really.
Yeah, well, that would be my thing for people. Like, have a chat with me, reach out to me on all the links that you send, because I love talking to people about these things. That's what I live for. I feel like my purpose in life is to be able to hold those conversations with people and help people discover a little bit more about themselves through talking to me or through being around me or through my example, right?
Yes.
And like, it makes my life complete when I know that I'm able to be that for other people. So please reach out. Please be open with me about whatever challenges you face, and particularly in the workplace, because that's where I really specialize right now, me and my dad. And I think that's the place where I can create the most impact for any individual that comes to me.
Yes. I'm so happy. Thank you for creating a better place for everyone. I actually, before I ask you my last question, I want to know, you know how before you were talking about unconditional love?
Yeah.
Can you yourself love unconditionally?
It's a tough one. My answer to that is I believe it's a thing that we're all working towards. But as human beings, while we have a flawed state of existence where we have in our nature the capacity to sin and to do wrong things and our capacity to do good and serve people, like that's inherently part of our current makeup as human beings, is to be able to do bad things and to do good things. And that's it. And you can see that in the existence of society. There's always things that are bad and always things that are good. And I believe that's in the world's nature, and I believe it's in human nature. So it's more about a process of trying to work towards how do we find that happy medium between what's right, what's perceived as right and wrong, and focus on what the truth is. I think unconditional love is getting access to the truth and being able to live on the narrow path versus the broad path, which being in the right and the wrong create. So what I mean by that is I think love is found in the center of everything. So if like trying not to live in what I call extremes of like elation and then deflation and then elation and deflation. A lot of human beings live in that state. And that's what I call a stress state, where we're living in this constant, like, one moment is good, the next is bad, the next is good, the next is bad. Like if you think about bipolar illness, that's a mental illness where we're living in these extremes, and it's really extreme, right? The purpose in, like, I feel like unconditional love is found not in the peaks and we're going like this, but like in the center. So if we can work towards getting to that place where we're peaceful and rested and centered, I think unconditional love begins to open up.
Yeah.
But I think we're always going to have this capacity to not conditionally love while we're in this human condition. I just think that's a part of our nature. But I think it's a focus on working towards looking at what unconditional love looks like and keep growing into it. I think that should be the focus. Keep growing into it, make it your life's work to grow into unconditional love, keep discovering more and more layers of love. Because to me, love is an infinite thing. So it seems like there's not like an end point where you reach this and I'm like, oh, I'm unconditional right now. But it's definitely something to discover more and more and more of, and be more heavily weighted in what it is to love and be love and embody it.
I love it. It actually got me thinking about this. Well, I guess the last question is a bit far away at the moment, because I wanted to ask about the thing that you talked about in the Bottle Up podcast, because you said most of the time people are doing things out of love. Do you want to elaborate that a little bit for people?
Well, could you elaborate for me what that specific part was? Because I can't remember exactly what part. Like, what do you mean by that? Because I can't remember what I said in that podcast.
Because what you said is your dad, he was doing out of love to go to work so he can provide for you guys. And yeah, and would you like to elaborate that love part?
Yeah, sure. So, like, on that specific example, like the reason why my father went to work every day, like the bottom line of it was love. And I think underlying everything that we do, every action we have, everything that we take, love is there. But often what happens is we pile all these things on top of it. And then it clouds our judgment of how to be loving or come from a foundation of love. And then we come from the foundation of that stuff we've piled on love. But at the bottom of everything, love is found.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's important for people to be able to clear out the junk, clear out the clutter in their mind, clear out the things that are keeping people from unforgiveness. Because even in unforgiveness, the only reason we find it so hard to forgive someone is because of how much we love them.
What? Oh, walk me through it.
As a human being. So maybe because there could be people where not forgiving that we don't even know, because we're just people that we see on TV and we don't like them and we have unforgiveness for them. Or it could be someone who directly hurt us. So it could be indirect or direct, right? But the point is, if we're not forgiving somebody, it's because there's a part of us that love that person so much that when they hurt us, if we find it that much harder to forgive them. There was a point in time in any relationship where we cared about that person. When we come into an interaction with that person and there's a relationship formed, love was there at the beginning. Then stuff happens, and then a relationship breaks apart, and then people really hang on to all the things that they don't like about that person or hate about that person, because they don't want to deal with the fact that they've lost somebody that they once really cared for. And this really applies to breakups.
Yep,
Right?
I get what you mean.
Yeah, so it's easier to hate someone who's left your life than it is to admit that you actually cared about that person.
Yeah. Oh my
It's
God,
really,
so
really
profound.
difficult. It's really difficult because I've been there myself. I can think of so many people have done that too, where I've had to come full circle and finally take the time to find the courage, build myself up to come back and tell them, hey, I actually really cared about you. And I was just too afraid to admit it. I had a conversation like that the other day with a friend who I fell out with. And we fell out because like things happened in our friendship and it broke us apart. And we didn't speak for a few years. And then we came back together and we had this conversation like for the first time in like 2 years, like properly one-on-one, where I admitted, hey, like the reason I did all those things is because I was just so hurt. And I was too scared to tell you how much I actually cared about you because I didn't feel like you cared about me. And then that person said the same thing. But it took that time for us to heal, to actually be able to come from a place of love in the way that we spoke to each other and be like, hey, at the bottom of our friendship, love was there all along. And it was also our inability to be with each other and develop the relationship out that caused us to break apart, and then focus on why we didn't like each other. Because we remember how good it was when we were friends. We remember all the good times. We remember all the things that we loved about each other. We remember how like life was just so much better when we were like spending precious moments together, developing, I don't know, just like moments in life that we look back on and that we never forget. But because that was broken, we're like, oh, I don't even want to think about that because that's the painful part. So I'd rather not forgive you because then it puts me in a place to be like, oh no, but you caused me all this pain. So like, I don't need to think about all the things that I actually really loved about you.
I love it. Thank you so much for being so honest and raw. That was beautiful. So for those who are listening and watching, it's okay. It's a work in progress and the time will come. And when you admit it to yourself, then I guess that's the door. That is when the door opens. I just kind of want to quickly mention about what you said about the right and wrong though, because everyone has a different opinion on what is right and wrong. So you said it so perfectly about seeking the truth, whatever the truth that means to you really, because that's your own journey. This is your life. And yeah, that was perfect. And with the love part, I guess I was a little confused, but that was so beautiful because you're right, because you need to say goodbye to an old self and an old relationship and old whatever it is, and it can be a very painful process. But for parents who are listening, sometimes they might be like, I am doing certain things because I love them. At that point, I kind of want to encourage them to actually think deeper. If you really love them, I would encourage you to let them be, because what you're doing is you are putting your expectations of your love and wanting them to be the version that you want, and you feel like that is love. Yeah, I hope that people are following what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that because that was what happened with the dad. So I felt like my mum and dad put their expectations of how I should be as a person on me. And then I blame them for that, right? It's a very difficult thing, but this is where the empathy came in and our healing came in, is I understood how difficult it was for mum and dad to raise me. I actually said, what was it like living with a son who never listened to you or never respected the things that you said? And my mum said it was very difficult to live in a house full of men who didn't know how to like speak about things, or like who just like outbursted at anything she said, and she felt trapped. And me learning that as a son talking to a mother, like gave me a perspective on why she did the things that she did. She felt trapped in her life. She didn't know what to do. She didn't have any support, anyone to talk to. The three men, my brother, me, and my dad, that were in her life, were very suppressive, and like didn't allow her to tell us what to do or to say anything or to really move. And that happens to a lot of women. And I sure a lot of men resonate out there with having done this or having had this impact on women, which is why I'm working with men specifically, because actually working with men also helps me indirectly work with healing women.
Thank
And
you.
it's almost covering two birds with one stone. If men start to take responsibility for their character in organizations, they're going to start to behave more in a way that women feel safer to be themselves in the organization. So it cascades. So for me, this is a human thing. This is not a model man thing. This is a model human thing. But I call it the model man because I see men as the access to the change.
Yes.
That's why I'm doing this work with men.
Yes. I love it. And I'm sure you guys have brought some learning lessons to your mom. And yeah. And for those who are listening and watching who are males, I hope that you don't feel like you are to blame. It's just, a different way to open up your mindset. No more playing the victim.
Yeah. I say skip the guilt trip and just focus on what to do next. Because part of being human, as I said, is being flawed and making mistakes and hurting others. It's a part of the human condition. Like, it just happens. Right? And we're all learning, we're all trying to navigate this world, and we're all trying to come to this place where we're unified, but it's very difficult to do that in a world where sin and pain and suffering exists. So the best thing that we can do is not blame ourselves, skip feeling sorry for ourselves, skip sitting in the shame and the guilt, dust ourselves up, get up and be like, okay, what's the thing that I can do to improve on so that I don't do this again now that I'm aware of it? Now that I'm aware that this behavior is impacting people this way, what can I do to move forward and make a change? And definitely don't be so hard on yourself. Men and women need to stop blaming themselves and need to stop blaming each other. Imagine what a different world this would be if everyone stops the blame and looks at how to actually work together and looks at, wait, what's that person's point of view and why do they think the way that they think? And getting interested in that is what's going to change the world.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for honesty. Thank you for your work. And like you said, men and women, we really need to stop blaming each other. And doesn't matter men or women, what gender, what background, what religion, it doesn't matter. We're all just human beings. We all bleed the same blood. And we all breathe air. So that's just, please be there for each other. So before I ask you my last question, is there anything in particular that you feel like I didn't ask or you would like to share?
Is there anything present for me right now? No, not in terms of that has been missed, because I think everything that we were shared was meant to be shared. I really do believe in whatever's happening is meant to be happening, and I live my life by that modality. Because if I live that way, then I'm not trying to control the circumstances or force anything. So even if a challenge arises, that challenge happened because it was meant to show me something. And inside of that, what I'll cover is, I feel like a good thing for people to adopt is looking at their reality as a mirror. So everything external to my physical body, look at that reality and what's showing up, and look for evidence of what that's showing you about yourself. If your environment's positive, if things are happening in your environment, people, places, objects, the things that are in your environment will always reflect who you are internally. Everything outside is a manifestation of who we are within. When I learned this was when I was in the hospital bed. I came to that realization that it was my inner world that creates my outer reality. So if we start to take that lens on life, that's where we start to take full responsibility for everything, because we're like, oh, if I change myself internally, everything will start to show up around me differently. And that's how I've been able to produce a lot of results, do a lot of the things that I do, is working on me and me and me. Eventually, things around me just start to shift. People start to come in, other people start to move out, depending on where I am with my life and what's showing up. Even my partner recently, who came into my life after knowing her for 10 years. She came into my life as my partner when I was ready to receive her, when I had done the internal work for her to drop in and become that person who could walk with me together in partnership. So we could be equals and we can walk together and contractually come into a relationship where we're focused on serving one another, rather than having selfish intention and be like, this is what I want from you. But
Yeah.
I would have been like that 10 years ago when I was 20, when I was young. I would, like, if I'd gone into a relationship with her at that time, the timing would have been wrong and we
Yeah.
wouldn't have worked. So
Yeah.
there is a perfect divine timing to everything if you believe it.
Mm,
What
that
you
was so,
believe, you will receive.
yes, that was so beautiful. 100% agree. And that will help people to live more presently, I guess. And I really, really, really love what you just said, how when your partner came in, you are ready to receive. If you didn't, like you said, if you didn't work on yourself, you will keep on rejecting those people who want to love you and grow with you. And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that was just that was just so beautiful.
I've definitely rejected love from people so much. I think everything does work in terms of giving and receiving in life. And a lot of people are very good at giving and struggle to receive. And I am one of those people. I really struggle to receive love, receive contribution, receive anything. It works in money as well, receiving money versus like investing your money and giving it away, or like donating to charity. People can do that with ease, but they very much struggle to actually accumulate wealth. It works in every area of your life. Giving and receiving is like the essence of life. And if we're able to balance our ability to receive and ability to give, it starts to create a loop that gets bigger and bigger and enlarges our capacity to receive and enlarges our capacity to give, and that it just keeps cycling. And we become bigger and bigger human beings that way. Because we give of ourselves more and more and more to people, which is what I'm doing through the model man. And I then receive in from people like you, because I'm receiving contribution right now, just even being on this call with you. Like I get to be myself inside of this conversation. That's receiving, right? I get a platform or a medium where I get to talk to someone who has allowed me to be myself and express myself. That's receiving. Now, how blocking receiving would have looked like is if I didn't want to come on the call because I was scared to express myself on here. I'd actually be blocking my ability to receive, and then I'm blocking your ability to contribute to me. And this is now happening with both of us because I'm allowing you to do the same by us receiving and giving communication. I'm
Yeah.
receiving communication and you're giving it, and vice versa. And that's what's creating the flow. And that's what's created the energy of this conversation. People will listen to this call and be inspired by it because we've created this effective flow. That's just how
Yeah.
life works. Life works in give and receive.
Thank you. That was a very, very beautiful ending to what this whole Model Man is about, really. Because, yeah, I just want people to go and get in touch with you because it's so important. We are really here for other people. And when you are able to serve other people, you are going to find so much more love. And there is never enough love in this world. And you know the saying, I know it's cheesy. People say love always wins, but it does.
I agree. I think, and that's where playing the long game comes in, right? The model man's about not short-term game, but long-term game. Not short-term approach and short-term results, but long-term gain and long-term results. And I think love is a long-term game. So that's why it becomes very difficult to be loving if you're always focused on immediate quick results and hitting deadlines and all of this stuff. It makes it very difficult for you to be in a loving state for yourself. That's what produces the stress, is the fact that you're not in a loving state. You're not in an arrested state. But if we play the long game and we're focused on the long term, then we tend to give ourselves time to breathe. And then in the long run, we end up achieving even more results than if we just did stuff in the short term. An analogy I use there is chopping a tree down, two people chopping a tree. So imagine one person is chopping a tree nonstop and they just keep hacking and hacking and hacking at the tree. And the second person spends most of their time sharpening their axe. Now, the person who sharpens their axe is the person who's actually going to chop the tree down quickest in the long term, because the person who's chopping the tree down without sharpening their axe gets blunt and their chops get less efficient. So but if they're not sharpening their axe at all, then we'll never actually end up cutting the tree down in the long term.
Yes.
But what happens is the person who spends their time sharpening the axe, they've rested because they haven't burnt energy chopping the tree, and then their chops are more efficient when they go to chop the tree, and they chop the tree in less time. So if we're looking at the same time frame, the person who didn't sharpen the axe and is focused on short-term gain by chopping constantly without sharpening will always lose out to the person who plays the long game. And that's in life. You'll be less free. You'll constantly be stressed. You'll constantly be putting maximum input and then receiving minimum output. Versus somebody who's willing to take the time to relax, to rest, to give themselves that permission in their day, in their schedule, to actually give time to themselves, to love themselves, and then to love others. And then when they go to work, being efficient with that little time that they have, they've actually produced a life that's more of a well-being centered and rested lifestyle. See the difference?
Yeah, there's so many things I want to say because the sharpening thing, that is an amazing analogy. And also just reminding people that from time to time, you also need to take risks. Even though you have been sharpening your axe, you still need to take time to sharpen it. And for those who are listening and watching, if you feel like you resting is watching TV or sitting there doing nothing, I would encourage you to second think about how is it really resting your mind, because whenever you're watching things or listening or whatever you're doing, it is subconsciously, you're receiving all those information. So if you are watching the news or watching whatever horror movie, is it really helping you? You need to take responsibility and have the awareness of it. Well,
that's a good one.
Thank you very much. I feel like we honestly can talk for ages, but let's not do that. We can save it for the next episode, maybe. So my my last question for you is, how do you think we can be there for each other in general?
Well, the mode of being there for each other is through communication. Communication is the way that we can be there for each other. We can be there in presence and just sit with someone, or we can actually communicate with them. Those are the two mediums to be in contact with someone. So I think making the effort to check in on people, see how they're going, make it part of your life to put importance to connection. I prioritize connection very highly in my life, and I'm constantly there for people. I talk to people on the phones. I make sure that I'm consistently putting myself in the presence of others in some capacity each week, in a way that we're creating beautiful connection. Because I think connection is the way to be there for others. If you're not connecting, then you can't be there for them. You're just not with them, right? And then people feel alone. So I think reaching out, checking in, that's just a powerful tool. And I think something that's really working around the mental health space is the idea of checking in with someone and just giving them a call and seeing how they're going and having no agenda other than just to see how your friend's going. And like doing even what I did with Dane, like before this call, is just to give him a call and say like, hey man, like how's everything been? That's what I did. And do it from a place that feels led. Like don't force it, but when you feel led to call someone or reach out or talk to someone, just send them that message. A lot of people think about, oh, I really want to talk to that person, and they never send a message. I know I do that sometimes, and I've worked on it. I think just make it a habit to, when you have that thought, put something into existence to actually connect to that person. Because the fact that you had that thought, just to even think about that person, see how they're going, you don't realize how much that can make someone's day for you to actually reach out or even just send a text saying, hey, I was thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Like that little thing, like if I received that, like think about how you would feel, Ting. How do you feel if someone just sends you a random message saying, I was thinking about you and I hope you're doing well? How would you feel?
So much love.
Right? And that's the point. It doesn't take that much effort to connect and to be there for people as much as people think. The simplest thing we can do is send a text. Just to acknowledge that and it doesn't mean you have to go and chat to them. You might not have time to actually have a chat, but just even acknowledging the existence, acknowledging a person is alive is the single biggest thing we can do for a person who may be feeling very alone and you don't even know it. You don't know how one message can go and change a person's life. You don't know how planting one seed can sprout into something that leads somebody in a completely different direction in their life. You have no idea. That's true service. The ability to plant a seed, water it and walk away and not know how that seed will be providing shade for thousands of people, maybe 100 years in the future. You just don't know. True service is not needing to be there to see the fruits of it. but understanding the fruits of you planting that seed will be there for people long after you've walked away from that seed.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. I, you're such a beautiful person and you have a beautiful service. And I really encourage people to get in touch. You are not alone, first of all. Second of all, you are not weak for seeking out for help. And third of all, we are all human beings. So like you said, let's check on each other and yeah, just call people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, honestly, for your time and your wisdoms and your service. And yeah, I will talk to you next time, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I love this kind of stuff. I love talking to people. I love having conversations about life. I think I'd love to talk to you more just in life and connect.
What did you love the most about this interview? Would you choose to take responsibility for your thoughts, your actions, and literally your own life? On that note, I just want to say a huge thank you. Thank you for continuing to support the chats, support the interviews. You already have taken on the responsibility to venture out to living life differently. You have decided to be open-minded in other ways of living. You're amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. I would highly encourage you to really start asking your parents questions. All it takes really is that one courageous person to start the conversation. And maybe that's you today. But if you are really finding it hard, that's okay. That's why there are services like the Model Man out there. Please do get in contact. The details are in the description below. I can't wait to hear your journey and for you to share it with me and for you to receive more love because you know what? You deserve it. Again, please do screenshot this episode however you're watching it. We would really appreciate the love. Thank you so much for spreading the message with more souls. Now don't forget to subscribe, click the thumbs up button if you have loved it, and share it with someone because you never know what they're going through or what they might need. And remember, you're amazing and you are not alone. And I will see you next time.